Welcome to the CFB Dynasty Podcast with hosts Matt Knowles, Brian McElfresh, and Doug Gravely.
Hey everybody, how you doing out there in college fantasy football land? It's time once again for the CFB Dynasty College Fantasy Football Podcast. As always, my name is Matt Knowles, alongside the founder, creator, overlord, all those things of CFB Dynasty, the one, the only, Brian McElfresh. Brian, how are you feeling today knowing that Billy Napier is going to be the coach of the Florida Gators in 2025?
It's a lot to take in, to be honest. So for me, it's the whole year has been the Lane Kiffin to Napier scale. And right after the Texas A&M game, when Gunnar and I left in the second quarter, just miserable. It's just a hopeless beatdown, and there was no hope whatsoever for Florida to come back in that game. And we were healthier at that point. Just sucked. And I was like, oh, it's over. There's no way. Like, we expected an announcement that weekend, that Sunday or Monday, and it didn't come. And hey, somehow it's kind of figured it out. Like, the defensive backs, the whole defense is playing a lot better. And I can see both paths. One path is we bring Napier back, and instead of paying the buyout, you put all that money into NIL, and you pull in a Jonte Cook or whatever who just went into the portal, someone who looks at Lagway's deep ball and like, yeah, I want a part of that. And that's something that'll make that Lagway even that much more valuable going into the 2025 CFB Dynasty fantasy rankings. But I can see that path. You put all that NIL money down and become a big player there in the portal, and stack on top of returning 9 defenders off of a defense that's playing really well out of nowhere, seemingly coming off the bye week a few weeks ago. And obviously Lagway, Jaden Baugh, you return, I think, 4 out of 5 offensive linemen, and gonna need some portaling at receiver. Otherwise, I see that working out well. If there is the path, though, you guys know I love Lane Kiffin. If there is the path where FSU fires Norvell, which I doubt because of the money, and they get Lane Kiffin, I'll be livid, hating life at that point. But it's okay. I don't know.
As you were going over that, we got a couple of comments in the chat. Brett Pagney is excited for the show. But also in the chat live today, the one, the only Uncle Joe is in the chat. He probably thinks that he walked into a Dunkin' Donuts and got lost and found himself in the chat. But yes, it is Uncle Joe, the one and only in the chat. What is going on, Uncle Joe? So we're going to talk a little bit more about Uncle Joe a little bit later on in the show. When we talk about the different leagues we have going on and where we stand going into the final week of the regular season. This is a big week in college fantasy sports. Last week of the regular season. Can you find a way to get into the playoffs? I mean, in all of our leagues, there's still something going on for everybody else, but those are all secondary. You want to get into that dance. And, B-Mac, how you feeling about where you're at there? We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to that segment, but how are you feeling as far as your prospects heading into the postseason?
We're going to hit this in the injury segment here shortly too, but I'm going against Uncle Joe in the home league, and it's a win and have a chance to get in or lose and definitely be out. So Joe's got a solid team, but he's hurt. We're looking at Ole Miss, we're looking at Scatabo. Both of those guys are hurt and seemingly unlikely to play this week. So we'll see how the injuries work out for him. Where injuries have affected my whole season, but I'm getting a little healthier now. Damon Ward comes back with a couple touchdowns last week and is a great value on DraftKings.
Well, you know what though? I just looked at our running list today. We are supposed to be talking about the home league, the open league, and the Masters League right now. So why don't you go ahead and pull up the the home league right now. We can talk about where we're at in that one real quick. I know we're kind of odd going to this first, but it is the last week of the regular season, so let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I mean, my feelings are going to be all in on this game, and I will say, let me ask you real quick, Matt, as we get the show started. How does it feel for you on those midweek games? Like I've got Caden Robinson playing tonight, and it feels like because he's the only guy. Like I don't think Uncle Joe has someone tonight, and then I've got two premium running backs playing on Friday night. I really feel like those games are bigger because it's alone. Like the stakes are so high. Like I have to have those guys overperform, or else I feel like I'm gonna lose.
Absolutely. I mean, I've had Devontae Ross in other leagues. I've had Devontae Ross, and some other guys. I mean, Western Kentucky playing on midweek games, and that always is, definitely, especially when you have like a quarterback playing in midweek. You've got you got to have those things because if you don't, then you're sitting there with like a 3 for days and just kind of like being embarrassed by your score.
So I hate when I have like a player that's playing on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and you're going into the fantasy playoffs because, man, the stakes feel high on those games. But here in the home league, I've got the screen up in the standings. So it's kind of worked out kind of perfectly for me. Josh Reed beat out Dillingham last week. I had a couple things fall into place for me to have a chance to get in. And number 5, so we got the top 6 that get in. I'm sitting at number 7, 1 game behind number 4, 5, and 6. So it's a close spot there. But at number 4, William, he's in. He's got enough points for if I beat out, if I win this week against Uncle Joe, and let's say Josh Reed loses to Oregon, then I'll be in. If Josh wins in a shootout, then I've got to win and get a ton of points too. So we'll see there. It's going to be a close one.
All right.
And you're sitting there pretty obviously with the number 1 slot and the bye week, the coveted bye week going into the fantasy playoffs.
So one of the things we do have this thing set up as divisions, even though BMAC is showing the full standings together. Our first tiebreaker is overall points. So mathematically, I'm not the number 1 seed. But if Joe was to come and outscore me by 300 points this week, he would be able to get that one. I feel pretty good about where my team is. Just looked at a mock draft this week, as this is college to pro, and I had 8 guys on my team drafted in the first, but like between the first and the early part of the 4th round, which is uncommon territory for me. Normally, I'm like, I'll have 5 wide receivers drafted between the 5th and the 7th, and maybe they make a practice squad. So seeing those guys, Ashton Genty and Dylan Sampson, Omarion Hampton, all having a chance to be high NFL picks for my college team this year, this is going to be the year because I've definitely got a lot of those guys. So if it ain't this year, I don't know what year it's going to be. Just got to get through that semifinal round, figure out what poison I get to pick. One of the fun things we do in this league is that when you get to the semis, whoever the number 1 seed is gets to pick which one of the guys that won in the wild card to be their opponent. So I better pick right and hopefully get myself into the championship. But we'll see what happens.
I love that idea. That was a great one. Was that yours?
Yep.
That was a great idea.
So let's roll over to the Masters League now. So last week in the Masters League, I said I'm playing the bottom 2 teams in the league. If I can't get a win over the bottom 2 teams in the league, I don't deserve to be in the playoff hunt. Lo and behold, I lose to both teams at the bottom of the hunt, and I am out of the playoffs. Bums me out. Last year, I was the 7th seed, barely missed the playoffs. This year, I lose to the bottom 2 teams. I'm going to be out of the playoffs, going to be hoping to be able to stave off relegation in our relegation battle. BMAC, how you feeling about where you sit in the Masters?
Oh, terrible, because I mathematically can get in, but I'm going to be competing with the rest of you guys in the open league because of the points for. So I think we're pretty set here. We can congratulate Saucy Dossie, Dillingham, Harry Dog, CFB Tucker, Dragon Masters Josiah, and Rutgers FC Mike Davis for keeping their spot there in the Masters.
So with having you and me and Doug all in the bottom, and Oaktown was our champion last year, right?
No, Saucy Dossie.
But Oaktown, I think Oaktown played him in the championship.
Correct.
So only 2 of those 6 at the bottom are going to be guaranteed spots in the Masters next year because of the relegation battle. So it's a guarantee that either you, me, Doug, Oaktown, 2 of them at minimum are going to drop to the Open League. That is an embarrassment. That is disgusting. BMAC, we cannot let that happen again. I am not happy about this.
Yeah. Well, injuries happen, and it was rough. Rough season.
All right, let's roll over to the Open League really quick. So the Open League, these guys are not only battling for the Open League championship, they are also trying to get themselves up into the Masters next year. Next year, there's going to be 16 invites for the Masters. So right now, Steve 77063 is at 16-4, and Victoria's Secret at 13-7. I think that the 2 of them are pretty much a lock. I don't think that there's any way, unless Victoria's Secret was to drop both and have some kind of craziness happen out of the Nineveh Whalers at 7. I think that they are going to be in. So you got a logjam of 4 teams at 10-10, all the way down to number 11 that have a chance to potentially sneak in at that number 6 spot, but they'd need to have every mathematical possibility happen. Too many things for us to worry about at this point. But again, even if you don't make the top 6, 2 teams are going to have a chance to be able to sneak in and be promoted to the Open League or the Masters League next year. Been fun.
Debbie Warehouse has been streaking up the standings there. I think they're going to earn their way in. They're on fire right now. So killing it there. And, lessons learned for me. And I knew this going into the year, but I did it anyways because I was all in on Torrey Horton. I always had that 6th, 7th, 8th pick in the draft. It affected my home league team because he was a holdover from the previous year. But Horton, man, you just got to mix it up a bit more. Horton and Jaden Blue, I had too much of that in these drafts.
Yeah, Jaden Blue, one of those guys that just got a little too high on him, and he definitely did not perform the way that we expected, but it is what it is. Sometimes the guys pan out, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you make a knuckleheaded move like cutting Caleb Johnson, and sometimes he comes back and is the second best running back in college football. My bad. All right, so that's our quick little review of the Masters, the Open, and the Home League. Now it's time to hit the drop for some news and notes.
News and notes around college football.
All right, we got some big news coming out this week. BMAC already mentioned one of them. Jonte Cook from Texas has left the program. He's going to be hitting the portal. Sounds like this was a mutual decision, not just a Jonte Cook lead. It sounds like the program is ready to let him go as well. Quarterback Brady Cook from Missouri, he is questionable. Nick Anderson, wide receiver, Oklahoma, he's still out. Has only played once this year. He might be the single most disappointing player of the entire season because every week it's will he, won't he, and it seems like he's been won't he every single week. Quarterback Diego Paiva for Vandy listed as probable. He's had a great season, so hopefully he's going to be able to get back and keep that going. Wide receiver Isaiah Bond from Texas, probable week 11. That's a huge one to keep your eye on right there, because he could be a key to some fantasy victories if he's able to play. DJ Lagway for Florida, he's questionable. BMAC, after this news and notes segment, we're going to talk about if that's surprising for you that he's even questionable, not just out after that scary injury last week. Kyron Drones, Virginia Tech, quarterback, full go in practice. Running back Cameron Scatabo had a massive week 10, but he's doubtful this week in week 11. How is that going to affect fantasy lineups? And then wide receivers Trey Harris and Jordan Watkins as doubtful, and tight end Caden Prescorn is probable. Keep an eye on that. That's a lot of people to have out in your wide receiver and your receiving core right there. Hopefully these news and notes can help you to take your college fantasy game to the next level here from CFB Dynasty. So BMAC, let's go back to the DJ Lagway situation. Last week, he had a scary injury where he hyperextended his leg, pulled his hamstring. Are you surprised to see that he's even on the injury report for this week and with the potential of playing?
So I didn't see any hyperextension or anything, but it looked like he was going down kind of normal, and then you saw him like hold his hamstring immediately. So having him get carted off in the game, yeah, I kind of expected, oh, his season's over. Napier also said, oh yeah, it's a significant injury. Like he said that after the game. I don't know how I feel, because it's obviously, the potential of they just want Texas to prepare for him. He was reported to have practiced. We don't know how much he practiced or what kind of things he did or can or can't do. And hamstrings are one of those things that you don't play with. So,
yeah. If he was a pocket passer, it'd be one thing, but you're talking about a guy that's dual threat. I find that concerning that he's even projected to play, because hamstrings don't heal that early. I've had hamstring injury. I had one about 11 months ago myself, and I still to this day have to be very careful when I'm out there on the soccer field refereeing about how far I step, because I don't want to re-aggravate it. So talking about a significant injury 1 week ago seems very interesting to even have him having a consideration. Maybe it's because of where your quarterback depth is past him on Florida this year. Maybe they have no choice but to keep him on the injury report, but it seems interesting to me.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be touching him in fantasy, because even if he plays, he's not going to be full go on the dual threat. I mean, he's great on the deep ball, but he's going on the road against a really good Texas team. So staying away 100% on fantasy, and we'll see. I would just expect them to try and make them prepare for Lagway and have him not go pregame, and then let him play at home when they have, Ole Miss and LSU as the next two games.
All right, so we have had a ton of activity in the chat so far. I love it. We got a lot of activity there. And one thing we want to let you guys know, yes, this is a college fantasy football podcast, but BMAC and I both play a ton of pro fantasy football as well. So if you got a pro question that ends up in the chat, don't be embarrassed that you put a pro question there. We'll take a swing at it, because, hey, we both play just as much pro football fantasy as we do college. So let's see some shout outs. So Brett Pagney, obviously Pac Joe is already in here. Mordrax Place says, what's up? Tyler Sperry is in the chat. Thanks for asking us questions again. Don't worry about the fact that you ask NFL question. We're good there. Super C&B Challengers has got a good question. We'll hit that when we get to the end of the news in the questions from the Peanut Gallery. So yeah, we love seeing all you guys out there. Mordrax Place, all this math is hurting my brain. Well, that's what fantasy football is all about, man. There's so many numbers, so many spreadsheets. That's what it's all about, man. That's why, but also that's why BMAC has a lot of algorithms out there to do a lot of this calculation for us. So all we're doing is reading the numbers. We're not having to do it ourselves. Like I said, we'll get to those questions at the very end, but we appreciate every single one of you being out there in the chat. You make the show that much more fun for us. So thank you all again for being out there.
One from the injury segment, from Brett. He asked, do you think Lane Kiffin is just messing with people about the injury report? And I don't think so. I know Ole Miss is under fire right now, not directly, but indirectly, because the SEC commissioner just came out talking about faking injuries, in which, Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin are obviously doing a ton of, and they're the poster child for it right now. I don't think he could afford to just mess with people and say, Trey Harris, maybe he's actually going to play, but he's listed as doubtful kind of thing. And Watkins did get hurt, so he's doubtful. I just think that opens up an opportunity for South Carolina's former number one wide receiver to kind of step up and have a game against Georgia.
Yeah, and I definitely want to give a shout out to the SEC. I mean, being an ACC fan, there's always a lot of talk from the SEC about how also ran the ACC and everybody else's, but I do really like the SEC taking the lead and forcing everybody to be on the official SEC injury report. I wish every conference in the country would do that, because playing with the injury report like it's part of the game plan to me is unacceptable. Faking injuries in a game to me is unacceptable. I love the fact that the SEC is trying to take a stand on both of those elements to try and clean up the game and clean up. I mean, the betting world is such a huge thing, and fantasy football has got money riding on it, whether it's money or just, bragging rights. And you can't be going into a game and just having somebody just not play just for no reason.
And on that note of gambling, we're bringing back the DFS host battle. So we'll have that segment at the end. Appreciate the shout out there, Jordan Harden. Rarely get to watch live. Just wanted to say thanks again, you guys. 8-2. I'm destroying the competition. That's awesome. Great.
Yeah, so
great
we'll come back to some of the other questions here later on in the show. So why don't we go ahead, take a look at them rankings.
Let's go. All right. Let me push that up on the screen here. So week 11 rankings, if you struggle to get to it, it's under rankings, click CFF, and then, or DFS, and you'll see the rankings article published there every Tuesday.
You can also go to news and articles recent posts, and it'll show up there as well.
Correct. Thank you for that. A quick introduction. So we have the rankings listed for quarterbacks all the way through kickers, defenses, special teams, and all that stuff based on so part of the basis is how you've performed year to date against the competition, and then also factored in the Vegas metrics like how many points are implied by the Vegas line and the spread for each team this week, and then of those points, on average, how many will that player individually score? So it's projecting an actual points projection, and that's all of that stuff baked in. So full year of data and this week's opponent factored in there. So Parker Navarro for Ohio. He's someone we haven't really talked about. He's averaging 21.64 fantasy points per game, but because they're playing Kent State this week, for example, they're projected to score 36, which is quite a bit more than Ohio normally scores. And of those 36, we project Navarro to get 31.16. So there's just they're the 129th defense against quarterbacks, and that's an example of kind of how this works, where you'll see some players pop in and pop out of the rankings. And when we get to the start 'em, sit 'em question, I've got one where the number one wide receiver on our rankings, I had going into the week, I always set my lineup on Sunday, right after the standings adjust and all that stuff, based on who I expect I'll start. And then we do all this prep and data Monday and Tuesday. And then when we publish it, I was not expecting to see one of these guys in our top 12 who hasn't been performing really well.
One of the interesting things about doing the show when we do is because when you got the Maction games Tuesday, Wednesday, every week we've been able to cover somebody that already has played, and we can see how it panned out. So Parker Navarro is a great case study. So he personally performed below what we expected, but his team did not. His team scored, it was a 41-0 absolute beatdown over Kent last night. And it just looks like there were more rushing touchdowns and things like that than were expected. We can't project for defensive scores and things like that, but it was the beatdown that we expected. It just didn't come from his hands as much. Yeah. But I definitely think that the projection of him being there made a lot of sense because Ohio is going to crush Kent. Kent is one of the worst teams in college football this year, and the algorithm got that right.
The game script just went too far one-sided, and when it's like that, yeah, you're going to run the ball, you're going to get out of there with a win, and it was a dominant Ohio performance. But if the game script swings hard one way or the other, that's rough always for fantasy.
So we got Shador Sanders at 11. So BMAC, what do you think about the discussion that there is a potential path for Colorado to make the CFB playoffs? Do you think that is just hyperbole, or do you think that there's a chance for Shador and Dion to actually make the college football playoff this year?
There's definitely a chance. I think that would be super entertaining. I'd love to see them in the playoff. I want to. So it's still going to be hard without them having a run game. There's no way they have zero shot at winning the title with their limitations as a team. But yeah, I like Shador this week. It's one of our shootouts of the week this week, and that's one that should be a pretty close game, with both teams projected to score close to the 30s, and I like that one a lot. One of the things that I don't want to see, um, is my top wide receiver Josh Kelly get guarded by the number one corner in the country. And we'll see if Travis Hunter guards Josh Kelly to shut him down. That's like it's like an NFL style thing that you consider. When you have a wide receiver that's on your team, no matter how good he is, going up against one of the top corners in the game, that can dramatically affect the output fantasy wise. So that one's going to be tough to see, and that maybe that'll go into my. Maybe you guys can help me on the start 'em sit 'em segment there, where I've got four receivers that are pretty good plays, and I got to sit one of them.
So you go down to number 19. You got a couple of interesting ones in here. 19, Caden Salter. Liberty is absolutely falling apart right now. A team that was the darling of college football. Can Caden Salter get it turned around against Middle Tennessee? And then Chandler Morris. Chandler Morris has been blowing up. He actually has been my main starting quarterback alongside of Shador in the home league, where you see I'm the number one seed. But the algorithm does not like him against the Army defense. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Chandler Morris can handle that Army defense this week.
Yeah, if you go to the consistency tool here, you see Chandler Morris on the year is quarterback 4, and that's sorted by total fantasy points scored so far. And he's been great. So Chandler Morris has been, as we go weeks 1 through 10. This will tell you how many, like where he ranked against all the rest of the quarterbacks that week. So week 1 he was QB4, QB 20 week 2, 81 week 3, 45 week 4, and then we go 6, and then bye week, and then 8th, 2nd, 5th. And then 151 last week. So it's been a really good season for him. Someone that I cut in the offseason in the home league to make room so that I could pick Lagway. But that's a tough one, but not hurting me in that league.
All right, so last thing I want to talk about on quarterbacks is you got to go all the way down. Keep scrolling. Nico Iamaleava, one of the darlings of college football at the beginning,
Draft
at
season,
44.
Yeah.
44 this week, man. What is going on?
Against a terrible team against the pass. So they're hosting Mississippi State in Neyland, and they're 124th against quarterbacks, but yet he's only projected 17.85. Definitely a sleeper. Like if you want to try and play the talent there in DraftKings or FanDuel or whatever, it's one of those where if you want to be in the playoff and have a chance to compete, like Tennessee needs to see him improve and that passing game improve. But yeah, it's been surprising for sure. He would, because of his talent, because they haven't really had receivers step up to be elite level. Like they don't have an Isaiah Bond or somebody like that. I would say he's a good trade for target this offseason. A really good trade for target in like keeper dynasty leagues, that kind of thing. I do want to touch base on Milroe, who he's been top 10 projected since early in the season. He's projected 16th, which is a bit down from his norm. They are on the road at LSU at night. And this is the classic 9-6 game from whatever a decade ago, but it's projected to be pretty high scoring, 30-28 type of finish, with Bama being slightly favored on the road there. But the key component to me here is after the bye week. So you saw how Ole Miss was trending for a while. with Jackson Dart, kind of underperforming, that offense underperforming. And then they had the bye week, and Dart comes out with 74, in our league at least, 74-ish fantasy points. We have bonuses, so he didn't get quite that many in a standard league, but he still went for whatever, 340 plus yards and 6 passing touchdowns, 5 to Jordan Watkins last week.
Dart actually had 515 passing yards last week.
Yes.
Yeah, he was out of control.
That kind of improvement, can happen. So, but with Milroe, I can totally see a path where he goes for 50 fantasy points. LSU hasn't been great against the pass. Can they get him loose as a dual threat quarterback running the ball, which they just oddly haven't been able to do? Are they a little healthier off the bye, that kind of thing, fresher legs? But then on the road at night against LSU, I could also see the path where he goes for 18 fantasy points and they just struggle like they have been. There's just a huge variance there. And I have to say, against Uncle Joe, with a chance to get in the playoff, he will be my last player to go, aside from Dalmas, the kicker. So it's going to be all my players have gone, and then it's all up to Milroe and how many points he can get on the road at LSU. That's going to be a heck of a game. I'll definitely, assuming the rest of my team performs up to standard, I'll be watching that one every single snap on the edge of my seat.
Well, then lastly, number 60, the algorithm must not have been impressed by NC State's 59-28 win last week over Stanford. There was a lot of rushing in that game. But they're like, said Bailey, we don't think you did enough in that game, so we're going to drop you down to 60. We'll talk about that number 60 in some other spots here coming up soon.
And how the algorithm will see that is how many points did NC State score last week?
Yeah, 59.
59. So they're projected this week to score 28. So, not as many points available against Duke this week.
All right, so let's roll on down to the running backs. The top of the table is exactly what you'd expect. Ashton Genty, Dylan Sampson, Marquez Cooper. Scatabo is one you want to keep your eye on. He's one that was on the injury report. And he had an incredible game last week, but he might not even play. So that's going to be one. If you've got him in your lineup, you want to be very careful about just thinking you're going to be able to ride him, because he might not even be in the game. Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey, Anthony Hankerson. Those are all names we're used to seeing up at the top. BMAC, is there anything that sticks out to you in the top part of this ranking this week?
Yeah, Pagney also chimes in there. Tootin is also questionable, and yes, that is true for sure. Marquez Cooper is one that has been consistently good. We haven't seen the game of back before he was at Ball State and he was killing it for Kent State. He would have monster games. Could we see that this week? And it's potentially there, because they're not an explosive offense, but both of these defenses aren't up to par. They're playing against New Mexico. They're at home, and that game is projected to be a 35 to 32 finish. So if they're able to do that, it's going to be potentially monster game for Marquez Cooper this week. So I do like him quite a bit, and he comes in as RB3 this week. Got Hankerson at 7, Mari Anderson at 8, and then Anthony Tyus there, Mekhi Hughes finishing out the top 10.
You know what, BMAC? I'm going to go down. I'm going to switch my brisket lock for this week, so just take that. So I'm switching my brisket lock. So I'll talk about my brisket lock later on. So I talked about the number 60 rank. I'm a little interested in what the algorithm thinks. How my boy Jonah Coleman has upset the algorithm to have him from Washington all the way down at 60. Yeah, he's playing against a Penn State defense. Yeah, he's playing away. But man, Jonah Coleman at 60, I wonder if the algorithm knows something that the rest of us don't. What do you think about Jonah Coleman being all the way down there at 60?
Yeah, I mean, they're projected to score 16 points this week.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Penn
algorithm
State's
has them
a
in a
tough place to
blowout.
play.
A blowout.
Yeah, they're projected to score 16. So I 16 to 29, and yeah, it's just a hard place to play. He would be a hard one to start, especially if you've got everything on the line. Um, can I give you a quick start sit here and
Do
see
it.
what
Do
you
it.
would do in my scenario here? So let's just say I've got so in the home league, got Marquez Cooper and Mario Anderson. They're in. They're both playing Friday night. So I'll be nervously watching those games. My flex though, and this is where the rankings do me no favor whatsoever. I've got LaQuint Allen at 23, Nick Singleton at 25, Jeremiah Love against a team that I hate, Florida State, at 27. So I think they're all good starts. Which one would you start this week of those three?
I think that Jeremiah Love at home against a shockingly bad Florida State team. Like, talk about surprises of the season. For Florida State to be as bad as they are this year just is shocking. He could have a huge game there. I think that if I had those three, I would probably lean on him. I would probably lean on him just because of who the opponent is and playing at home against Florida State.
Yeah, and this is where the consistency tool comes in. So LaQuint Allen has been trending pretty good. He did have an RB1 finish in week 6. Last week he was an RB10. They're throwing him the ball a lot, which makes it really difficult to start someone else. But Love had his best game. Love had his best game in a while. He finally got that double touchdown game and finished at RB18 in week 9. So a tough one. Also, I think Notre Dame, I could be wrong. I think Notre Dame's coming off a bye. So that's a tough one.
That is a tough one. I feel like if I had your roster and I had those guys, the one thing to be a saving grace there is I don't think there's any one of those guys that would be like, I'm going to be really upset if I have this guy on the bench and he blows up. I feel like they're all so close that it's almost a 3-sided coin flip between them all.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so
that's gonna go down to the wire.
That's going to be interesting. So let's roll on down here to wide receivers. So you got Nick Nash as always. I mean, I feel like he's been number one for weeks. That he's been the number one guy.
Yeah.
So number 4. So give you a quick interesting stat that I saw last week that I just did not realize. So CJ Bailey for NC State is the number 1 freshman in the country as far as touchdowns responsible for with 12. Number 2 is Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. I did not realize that those two were high school teammates last year.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
I didn't know that. I'm like, can you imagine being a unsuspecting high schooler having to play against that offense?
Yeah.
At Chaminade Madonna, that is unbelievable that you would have to play for that quarterback thrown to that wide receiver. No wonder Chaminade Madonna won so many state championships. I think they were in it 4 years in a row and won 3 of those 4. If you've got CJ Bailey and Jeremiah Smith on that offense, of course you're going to do that. But I thought that was a very interesting little stat there. See how old.
Yeah,
Coleman
Smith
is.
Projected 22 this week against Purdue. They've been in some tough games, some tight games, I guess, recently, Ohio State. So you really expected them to do better against Nebraska than they did. And then they had a tight game with Penn State coming down to the last possession. But they're expected to beat down Purdue. The implied points for in the spread and over-unders is 46 for Ohio State this week. So Jeremiah Smith's really high. Egbuka's high. Will Howard, I think, is QB5 projected this week. And you got both of their running backs are in the like 20 to 30 range just simply because there's not enough balls to go around there. But Jack Beck is wide receiver 3 projected this week at 22.5. Travis Hunter at 5, Egbuka at 6, Royals at 7, Amari Kelly at 8, Savion Williams at 9, Kyle Williams at 10.
Well, so what do you think if you were somebody that had Keyshawn Johnson there at number 12? Even though he's number 12, would you be comfortable playing him in your lineup? I don't know if I would.
All right, here we go. We're just gonna hard shift to the segment here because that is the guy that I need help with from everyone. So
really interesting. Interesting that we both.
All right, that was a little too quiet in the beginning. My bad. Anyways, start him or sit him segment. Keyshawn Johnson his targets have kind of been trending down. He's projected shockingly at wide receiver 12 this week for Western Kentucky. Early on in the season, he was getting 10, 11 targets. And the last couple weeks he's had, or maybe 3 weeks, I think he's had like 5 targets.
Yeah.
And no touchdowns. I think he's 2 touchdowns in his last 5 games and none in the last 3. So his momentum is not there. And then when I pulled up the rankings and I saw him there, I was just befuddled at where I'm going to go here with this. So here's my scenario. People chime in. Let me know what you think. I've got Caden Robinson, who's locked in. He's playing tonight. He's projected as wide receiver 14, projected at 15 fantasy points. I look at DT Sheffield, who's been North Texas's number 1 receiver, but wasn't really supposed to be because Damon Ward's been hurt most of the year. Damon Ward finally healthy. They came off the bye. He comes in, I think 6 catches, like 100+ yards and 2 touchdowns last week. So I'm going to ride that momentum and kind of not necessarily replace what we have as DT Sheffield there, but assuming Damon Ward is the top target this week, I could imagine that he would be projected right there. So I planned to roll with Damon Ward there. You see Trey Harris come in at number 18, so this doesn't really know that he's hurt and doubtful going into this week. And then I've got so I think those are 2 good options. And then I've got wide receiver 36, Josh Kelly, going against Colorado, and Travis Hunter, who just kind of subtly had 19 targets last week. So it's really hard to sit a guy that has that kind of potential of targets in what's going to be one of our, shootouts of the week in that segment here coming up. But all right, so I'll start with you in a must-win scenario against Uncle Joe. If you can pick 3 out of those 4, are you going with? Is Keyshawn Johnson, our wide receiver 12, projected 15.5 fantasy points this week? Are you rolling with him or are you sitting him?
So I'm going to answer that, but before I do, I'm going to say, Uncle Joe, I want you to feel like that. I want you to have a little bit of pride right now. I want you to feel a little bit of that welling up of pride in your heart, because BMAC is so worried about this game with you that he is asking the audience for help in how can he possibly beat you. So I love it. I love it. I can tell you right now, I would not play Keyshawn Johnson. Out of the 4 that you just said, I would go against the rankings. I would sit him specifically because of what we said last week. The Western Kentucky offense does not have anybody that is jumping up to the top. Caden Veldkamp is actually playing well, but he is also distributing the ball so well. There hasn't been a Malachi Corley that has just gotten tons and tons and tons and tons of looks this year. He is distributing the ball all over the place, and I feel like we would need to see him buck the trend to have somebody get a ton of targets. I think what you're talking about, if you've got a guy that's getting 19 targets, I say every single week, you want to look for somebody that's getting a lot of targets, because if they're getting a lot of targets, it means there's a lot of plays being called for them, whether they're getting the catches or not. If you got a guy that's getting 19 targets, I think he's got to be in your lineup. So Keyshawn Johnson is definitely the one I would sit out of the group that you just said.
Yeah, that's the plan. But again, anything can change when you're just gonna stew on it all the way up until those last games start. But Caden Robinson's the easiest start for me, and he plays tonight. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there.
All right. So I don't think there's anything else we really to talk about at wide receivers. We can jump on down to the tight ends, which has actually been surprisingly fun to discuss this year because there's been a lot more activity at tight end. When you've got people like Aronde Gadsden at 11 and Justin Jolie at 12, who have actually been producing quite a bit in the last few weeks, that makes tight ends be a fun segment. Harold Fannin and Holden Willis up there in the top three guys that have been pretty much stuck there all year. Terrence Carter, I don't think we've talked about him too much this year from ULL, your former fantasy alma mater, the Raging Cajuns. What do you think about him being up there all the way at number 4?
He's been consistent, solid-ish throughout the season, 11 fantasy points per game. And they're projected to, let's see, they're playing Arkansas State at home. They're 107th against tight ends. And they're projected to win by like 17 points and score 38.5. So he's a great start this week. And that's one of those things where the projected points for or the implied points for matters so much to tight ends.
Yeah, I think that it's been fun this year. I mean, for us to have with this tool, almost everybody in the top 10 projected with double-digit points. It's been a while since tight ends were getting that kind of activity, which is good because tight end kind of last couple of years has kind of fallen by the wayside. It's almost been can you find somebody who gets 5 points if you don't have one of those top 2 or 3 guys? So it's nice to have guys that can actually come in and have an impact in the game.
Yeah, there's been a few disappointments kind of going into the year. We expected, remember when Nyblack transferred from Alabama where he was doing some pretty decent work over to Texas? We expected him to take over as the starter, and he's like a dynamic playmaker and a really good offense, and just got beat out. Gunnar Helm has been solid for them, averaging 9 fantasy points a game. Mason Taylor was another one, just been disappointed in. Thought that LSU offense would kind of feature him a little bit more. Not that he's been bad at 8.5 fantasy points per game, but he hasn't been great. So he's down there projected as tight end 20 this week as LSU hosts Alabama projected at 7.3 fantasy points. And then Terrence Ferguson kind of down a bit. They had Evan Stewart come in there. Now that Tez is down and hurt for a little while, maybe Terrence Ferguson is one of those targets that you look at tight end and say, all right, if I've got to put him maybe in a flex position in DraftKings or start him as your fantasy tight end this week, he's one that might perform better than the projections this week. They're hosting Maryland. They're projected to score 41 points. And, maybe this is a week Terrence Ferguson can kind of break out.
All right, now you just mentioned Tez. Now, Tez, listen, I'm speaking to you, Tez. I'm speaking to you. I'm going to give you 2 weeks off. Heal yourself up. I need you back for the college fantasy semifinals. I'm not going to settle for anything else. Get your butt back. I need you, my man. Okay, now back to the show. All right, so there you go. That's the rankings. If you want to have access to those, you need to be subscribed to the CFBDynasty.com site. So that way you can go in and you can search and you can go and do the different calculations for your own squad. So that's why you want to go up there and become a subscriber to CFBDynasty.com. And BMAC, make sure that they know if they go and subscribe right now, it's not like they're only going to be a subscriber for 2 weeks. It's going to be a year-long subscription, right? So they'd be subscribing through part of this season and guarded a part way into next season at this point,
yep.
Right?
And then there's monthly stuff that you can kill anytime. So if you want to just try it out for a month, that's totally fine. But yeah, of course, if you have questions, reach out, let me know. My email is readily available for people, or I'm the contact on the sites. Hit me up in Discord, whatever.
So yeah, if you want to do, if you can go get a monthly subscription, this is the month to do it. End in the regular season, get into that playoff push. Go up to CFBDynasty.com right now. Get yourself a subscription. All right, with that being said, we already talked about it a little bit. BMAC wants to talk about the shootouts of the week.
Shootouts of the week.
BMAC, what are the games that you have got on your radar?
That's right. So these are the games that you can kind of pick some of the, like, if you're struggling to get somebody in your flex in DFS, or looking for someone who might overperform on the average, you're looking at these shootouts where these games are going to hopefully go down to the wire, maybe even hit the over. And that's where you're looking for opportunity. You're playing the numbers, playing the data, putting the data in your favor. There's 4 games this week that I'm looking at there. So App State against Coastal, that game is tonight. The over-under is 62.5 with a tight point spread. So it should be a really close game in the 30s for both teams potentially there. And then similarly, we talked about it earlier, but New Mexico at San Diego State, that's another one where it might be a little bit more running than the App State and Coastal game, but it's still projected to be a high-scoring shootout. And we've got Colorado at Texas Tech, and then lastly, Army against North Texas.
I think those games are going to be fun. North Texas just seems like no matter who they play, they're putting up a lot of points. I know the algorithm doesn't believe so as much about North Texas this week, but I do think that that's going to be a super fun game to watch. And if you've got skill position guys at North Texas, you want them in your lineup. All right, good stuff. Let us know in the chat. Are there any games you guys are looking out for as shootouts this week that we did not mention? I think that it'd be nice to see if you guys have any games you're looking out for to put up some big points out there. All right, with that being said, it's time for another drop. It's time for the Brisket Lock.
It's time for the Brisket Lock.
All right, so Brisket Lock. If you guys have never heard of the Brisket Lock before, that means this is the first time that you've ever watched this show. But you should know, BMAC is a connoisseur of the smoked meats. The man loves his brisket. And this is all about what player who is not in the top of the rankings would BMAC risk it all for that brisket. Every week we make projections or make predictions. To start the season off, I got off to a quick first quarter lead, basically, or the first 3 or 4 weeks I swept it with my predictions. Then BMAC has come back, and it's pretty much even right now where we sit with the Brisket Lock. So last week, BMAC went with Kevin Concepcion from NC State, who was a good dual threat option for NC State in that beatdown of Syracuse. He had 18.6 points for NC State in that stomp. I picked Savion Williams from TCU, who said, Kevin Concepcion, I will see your dual threat, and I'll be a triple threat. Had 8 receptions for 92 yards, 8 carries for 57 yards, and he had a 6-yard touchdown pass for, I think he had 23 fantasy points. So the verdict, I think Savion barely ekes out because he had the triple threat option over the dual threat. But overall, both of those picks were good. Concepcion has been a little bit down this year. NC State finally finding their footing on offense. I think both Concepcion and Williams did good. What do you think of that project? What do you think of that verdict? Do you agree that Savion just barely ekes out the Brisket Lock for last week?
Oh, Savion was the solid win. I love that pick going into it. It was a great pick where, they're using him in all sorts of ways. So he's amazing fantasy asset to have going into the playoffs this week. Love the pick. You get the clear win there, I feel like.
All right, well, good stuff. So this week, we got our projections for week 11 for the final regular season week. BMAC, who do you have for your Brisket Lock?
Partially, this is me willing it to happen. I talked about him earlier, Jalen Milroe. He's projected as QB 16, and I'm going to say he has a top 5 finish this week and kind of beats out our projection quite a bit. So coming off the bye, we know the talent that he has. They're able to kind of catch their breath, heal up a little bit, and they're going into a tough environment, which I think is good for them. Milrow's been a worse quarterback on the road this season, so that plays into it a little bit. It also, that's already baked into Vegas's metrics, so that's considered here. And I like Milrow and Alabama to figure it out. I think there's too much talent for them to continue to struggle. We saw what Dart and Ole Miss did coming off the bye in an Arkansas road game that was supposed to be pretty close. Ended up being a total beatdown with Dart being the top quarterback, I believe, last week. So I'm looking for Milrow to have something similar against LSU this week on the road. Who do you got?
So I was going to go with Jonah Coleman because our algorithm has him ranked so low at 60, but I decided, you know what? I'm going to change it up. I changed it up during the show. Still have confidence in Jonah Coleman. I'm going with CJ Campbell, the running back from Florida Atlantic, who's ranked, I believe, number 18 in our rankings this week. You go look at CJ Campbell's stats, not somebody that gets talked about because there's so many high-level running backs that are doing really big things this year. But listen to his stat line. Outside of October 19th, he's got 19.4, 26.5, 25.3 in the last week, 37.3 points for an FAU team that isn't that good. Normally, if a team is behind, you're going to see a lot more passing coming out of a team that is behind trying to catch up. But last week, they lost 44-21 to South Florida, and he still put up 37.3 points, 12 carries. He had 6 targets in the passing game. I feel like CJ Campbell is trending upwards other than that UTSA game where he had 2.8 points. So you know what? I'm going to roll with him this week.
He's finished as an RB1, meaning he's finished in the top 12 running backs for the week twice. He's also mixed in an RB 21, 27, 37. I like the pick, and that's a great brisket lock pick there.
All right, well, good stuff. So we'll see how that works out. A lot of good comments over there in the chat. We'll get to more in a minute, but I just saw one pop up. Brett Pagny said this is such a good show, Brett, and you want to know part of the reasons why this is a good show because you're in the chat, because you're always out there religiously making comments and being active. People like you is what motivates us to be able to do this. So thank you so much, Brett. We'll get to some of the other comments here in just a little bit. So where are we at now, BMAC? We'll talk about, that's right.
A host battle.
Here, we're going to talk about the DFS lineup, the DFS battle.
DFS host battle.
All right, if you know me, you know I'm a metalhead, so that's one of my favorite drops right there, man. I like the music behind that drop. Good stuff. Last year, we did the DFS host battle every single week, myself, BMAC, and Doug. This year, because Doug has decided that he wants to go and work at elementary school. We haven't done the DFS battle. I haven't talked about it as much. But this week, we are going DFS battle. So, BMAC, let's talk about what that is, what our guidelines are, and who we got.
Yeah, let's go. So we're just gambling against each other and donating a little bit to DraftKings along the way. And so it's me versus you here. I'm going to go ahead and pull up your roster, and you can go through who you've got here.
All right, so with some of the guidelines, we're only using the early games on Saturday.
Correct.
And part of the DFS battle is you only have a certain amount of dollars that you can use. So you can't just go and take the best guys. You got to maneuver around your lineup. I got Chandler Morris as my quarterback. I wanted somebody that I know every week, week in and week out, is going to always score. Damian Martinez at running back. He's one of those feast or famine. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get like 3 points in the standings, but he also might get 20. I've got Kyle Monangai. Hopefully he can get back from his injury. If he's healthy, he's a great running back. Pena from Syracuse for 6,100. That's another one of BMAC's guys right there. I decided that I wanted to have some fun, and I got Colston Loveland in there at tight end as one of my wide receivers, partially because he's a good value guy at 4,800, but he always seems to put up some stats every single week. He's a part of that Michigan offense. Isaiah Bond, I'm banking on the fact that he's going to come back from his injury. I think that Bond at $4,800 is laughably low. Will Shepard at 3,800. Again, he's another one of those guys that might get one target in a week, but he also could get 10 and have a big stat line. Had to fill in that gap there, so I picked him at 3,800. I think he was the last guy. And then Restrepo for Miami. Got him at 7,500. I got to go back and look because I really wanted to have a second quarterback in the lineup, but I think Restrepo's just been doing being too much of that wide receiver one for Cam Ward, so that's why I've got him in there at that super flex spot. B-Mac, now who do you got?
Yeah, Shepard's obviously a good play. That goes right into that the previous segment with the shootouts of the week. So always a great play in DFS. So I've got Will Howard as a great value. He's our projected quarterback 5 this week, but he's only $8,100. So you can think about the value per dollar there. Playing the math, that's the best quarterback option. And then I've got Maffa at $6,500 there as a running back, and then Udo for Army against North Texas, and what should be a big shootout this week. He was only $5,900, and he's averaging 18 per game this year, so I like him a ton against that defense. Agreed 100% on Bond. I just think he's under valued. He's playing at home against the Gators. Gators just lost their number one cornerback a week ago for the season, or 2 weeks ago. He didn't play in the last game. Got Damon Ward on my fantasy team. Let's go, 5,200. He's also super cheap, and just he's down there because he hasn't played a ton this season. So I love that selection this week. And then way down at 3,800. One of the stars of South Carolina's offense last year, Antoine Wells, with 2 wide receivers ahead of him that are doubtful. He does have a tough matchup.
It's a good find.
Yeah, that's a great potential start there. Great value there. And then I've got Josh Kelly, Mr. 19 targets last week, playing against Colorado. I just hope they don't have Travis Hunter on him all game. And then in my super flex, I have your starting quarterback there, Chandler Morris.
All right, so I think in looking at these lineups that I'm going to get absolutely destroyed. I think that I've just donated to your fantasy football fund.
We'll see.
That's a good lineup. That's a strong lineup. All DFS is always about finding those guys that are undervalued. Good finds there, man. All right, so we're going to questions from the Peanut Gallery. So we're going to go back. We had a bunch of questions in the chat. Some of them pro football, and you know what? That's fine with us because we definitely are just as knowledgeable in pro football as we are in college. So Super CMB Challenger says he just traded away Kamara and Flowers for Neighbors and Kenneth Walker Jr. in PPR. I'm telling you right now, if it's up to me, I think that he just got the absolute right side of that trade. Neighbors and Kenneth Walker for Kamara and Flowers, I think that's the good trade. I think he got the right side of that. What do you think, B-Mac?
Yeah, I like Neighbors quite a bit, especially if that is some sort of dynasty league. But Neighbors and Kenneth Walker, yeah, easy.
Yeah, definitely good there. Let's see here.
Especially Flowers is about to get diminished since they just made that trade for Deontay Johnson from Carolina.
Yeah, yep. My boy Deontay. So let's see. So a couple of things Jordan Harden said, I rarely get to watch live. Just want to say thanks again. Okay, we already had that comment. Okay, so Jordan Harden also said start 2, AJ Turner, Taj Brooks, and Ricky White in the flex position. B-Mac, who are you sitting out of that group?
Holy cow. All right, this is a tough one. A really tough one. So AJ Turner we have as RB16 this week on the road against Southern Mississippi, who's been pitiful against running backs. So he's projected at 19 this week. Taj Brooks, that's a shootout game. I expected him to be projected higher, but we have him a little bit lower at 17.83. So they're really close. It's kind of a pick 'em there, Turner versus Brooks, or you could sit Ricky White, who's wide receiver 20 on the road at Hawaii, which is always a tough place to go, but not so bad, I guess, from Vegas. But he's projected 14 this week, and UNLV is supposed to score 32-ish. So I think I'm going to roll with the algorithm there, as hard as it is to sit Ricky White. I think I'm gonna roll with both the running backs, man. We'll have to follow up on this one. What
I,
would you
I,
do?
I think I sit AJ Turner only because if you go back and look at his stat line for the last 5 weeks as a running back, whether it's a win or a loss, he's had no more than 15 carries. It's been 9 to 15 carries. Some weeks he does a ton with those carries. Some weeks, like last week against Joe Monroe, he doesn't do as much. I don't know. I mean, man, now that I even hear myself say it, I'm second guessing myself. So I think AJ Turner is who I would sit, but I'd probably go in and take a look. I do not think Ricky White is somebody that I'd be sitting. So I feel like Ricky White's the definite leaning towards a Turner sit, but Taj Brooks might be able to, might be the sit there.
So
That's a
I'll
tough
throw
one.
up the consistency tool here, and I think looking at this data, maybe this sways me there. So he's only finished in the top 36 running backs one time. So if you're looking to give yourself a competitive advantage there at a position, he's finished as RB3 in week 8, but otherwise not quite there. Whereas Ricky White, obviously would pull him up in the consistency tool since Haj Williams or whatever has started. He had one rough game, but otherwise he was 5, 10, 4, and then wide receiver 20 in week 8. So let's give him a consensus answer there and just say Taj Brooks, Ricky White. And then let's
All right.
follow up on it.
Yeah. So the only other comments that are out there. So then we got, so Brett says, Trevor Womack and Thomas Surdick are also big fans of the show. Shout out to them. So you know what? Trevor Womack, Thomas Surdick, man, we are shouting you out. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Brett Pagney, for giving them the call out, for us to give them the call out. So good stuff. All right. So B-Mac, you said you had some other starting sits. What else do you got for this segment?
That was really my one. I went ahead and went with it earlier this in the show. So that was it for me. That's going to be the struggle bus all weekend until the games actually kick off, if I'll stick with it or not. But I'm going to sit Keyshawn Johnson. That was my lean. So you kind of helped confirm it. So I appreciate it.
All right. So real quick, just at the end of the show, Josh Speed Reed, he must have just got done running a 40-yard dash in 45 minutes. He jumps on in here, says, hey, just got done. Any word on Tootin? And Brett did a good job. Look at Brett. He's hanging. He said, Josh, he's questionable. I'm not starting him as of now. Josh is somebody who's in our home league. He's also the Moonlight Waffles in the open league, doing a good job over there. Oh man, Josh is like, hey, way to dunk on me, man. But that's part of the fun of doing this, man. You got to dunk on each other, man. You got here just in time, man. At least you finished the race. So you got here before we were done. That's the most important thing.
That does call out, though, a feature of Fantrax that if you're not aware of it, if you're a commissioner, this is something you probably have to, I think you have to go in and physically toggle this on for it to be available for your league, because these kinds of injuries, especially as you go into the last week before the playoffs, matter so much. But if you look on the screen here, and I'll try and describe it for the podcasters, there's this little yellow marker here, which is your auto sub. So you get to literally click on one, and let's just say, all right, I've got Josh Kelly, Caden Robinson, Damon Ward, we've talked about. And then I can go in and put Keyshawn Johnson as my number one auto sub. Okay, so the deadline has passed according to our league. That's something you can configure, though. But you can use that little yellow icon there once it's toggled on to set your auto subs for people that are injured and may or may not play.
Yeah, I know last year that's when they debuted that, and it didn't work as well. I know we manually do auto subs, but if they've got that working, that's something that has to be done. I know last week I had a kicker that just didn't play. Starting kicker, they're like, you know what, we're gonna let the redshirt senior play just for the sake of doing it, and it would have been nice to know before the game started that he wasn't even going to take the field. So whatever.
Must have been senior day, I guess.
It must have been. I mean, whether it was or whether it wasn't, it made me not thrilled about the fact that I traded for a kicker and he just didn't play.
Oh my gosh, that was the
NC State mindset. Vine said, I'm like, dude, why is Caden Smith playing every single kick, man? Come on now. But
oh no.
What can you do? What can you do? Literally traded for him for that 1 week, and he just doesn't play for whatever reason.
Oh man. Well, thank you for the 17th round pick or whatever.
That's right. All right, guys. So that is Josh says Kincaid or Gesicki tonight. I think that I would go Kincaid just because Gesicki is far too inconsistent. He has been coming on right now, but Dalton Kincaid, I would probably go with him.
Agreed. Kincaid.
All right. So that is it for the CFB Dynasty College Fantasy Football podcast for this week. Super happy with all the activity out there in the chat. Really happy with all your activity. We are very much appreciative of you guys coming in and supporting this show. Thank you so much. Make sure you spread the word. Make sure you like and subscribe on all the social medias and help get the word out there so we can build this community, be involved in our Discord chats. Make sure you will let us know if you want to be involved in the Open League next year, and we can go from there. BMAC, any final words before we head on out of here?
Good luck this week to everybody except Uncle Joe. Good luck.
All right. And on behalf of the founder and creator of CFB Dynasty, Brian McElfresh, my name is Matt Knowles. We hope to see you next time right here on the CFB Dynasty podcast.
Thank you for listening to the CFB Dynasty podcast. Help us out by subscribing on YouTube and reviewing us on your podcast network.